Hello and welcome to World Series News. This is a special report based on Elon Musk's Neuralink, and a disturbing story has emerged that, at the very least, explains how science actually works using animals and the damage caused there. But it starts to, at long last, open up a big question, the question of whether human beings should be putting any form of implant into their brains, from one perspective, which is to perhaps improve the life of someone who may be a paraplegic, who wants to walk, or a blind person who wants to see. But it's another thing when you want to augment your reality by creating some form of improvement. For example, to run faster or to think better, and to be able to use that just to compete in normal society. This is a really disturbing advancement in the technology, and it's one that needs to be explored. And in the story with Elon Musk, as it goes, earlier this month, Elon Musk claimed on X that the monkeys who died during Neuralink trials were already terminal. Well, that argument's been refuted already by employees working there, and that's a disturbing situation. I'll give you a couple of examples of what happened. The first case was monkey or animal 20, as he was named, in December of 2019. An internal part of the brain implant being inserted into the primate broke off during surgery. Later that night, the monkey scratched at the site of the implant, drawing blood, yanked on the implant and partially dislodged it. Follow-up surgery discovered that the wound was infected, but that the placement of the implant prevented treatment. The monkey was euthanized the next month. This is a continuing story. This wasn't the only animal. Animal 15 was another one that began to press against a head following the receiving of the implant, picked at the site until it bled, and eventually lost coordination, shivering when personnel entered the room. She too was euthanized. And in March of 2020, animal 22 was put down after its brain implant became so loose that the screws attaching it to the skull could easily be lifted out, according to an autopsy report. It's absolutely shocking what's going on. And now Neuralink is facing a new group. Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine has sent letters to the US Securities Exchange Commission demanding that it investigates Musk's suspect claims. They're claiming they're going to put a safe device on the market, and that's why you should have to invest, Ryan Merkley at the Physicians Committee told Wired magazine. And we see his lie as a way to whitewash what happened in these exploratory studies. The reason that Ryan Merkley said that was that the failure of the implant can be considered purely mechanical and not exacerbated by infection. And the testimony of an anonymous scientist conducting research at the CNPRC seems to corroborate the ex-employees' allegations that they were pretty young monkeys. It's hard to imagine these monkeys who were not adults who would have been terminal. And that's led me to reach out to a number of different professionals in the field. The first person that I spoke to was Sivan Woodward. She's a professor of 18th century literature at Western Ontario University. Now, that might sound a little bit odd, but in her work involving the Enlightenment, she advocates for animal rights. And here she is to explain her thoughts. And joining me now on the show is Professor Sivan Woodward. Sivan, welcome to Compass.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time today, and this is quite a difficult subject with Elon Musk, Neuralink and primates that are suffering harm and death, and I wanted to get your perspective. How did you receive the story when you first saw it?
Well, I was aghast, but what happens is that I am an 18th century specialist and specialist of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment actually moved away from the Cartesian thought, where animals are machines. However, it moved also within scientific directions such as vivisection, and also strong progress in science through anatomy studies and science versus, let's say, religion. It was an interesting development, but it's also a century of compassion, the century of human rights, the century that also considered much more brotherhood with animals than was considered in the 19th century or previously through Descartes. Thing against for Elon Musk, but and actually what I have for him is that I consider him to be a bit of a visionary, a bit of continuing in the Enlightenment motion of progress and adventure and fantasy, but this is definitely not Disney World, and it's starting to seriously hurt animals and potentially people if they should think twice about they do no harm. But he's also proposing practically miracles, what we do at pilgrimage of Lourdes, for instance, which is to restore sight and to restore motions to people who are blind or who can't move. However, this can go awfully wrong. And when you read about these monkeys numbered as if they were just numbers, and machines holding hands, shaking when they see the experimenters coming to them. Name of the game, you're supposed to, progress with money, with university programs. And this is going to create horrible pain for animals to begin with. And if it's extended to people, horrendous affairs if these kids can go on right now.
Now, there's 2 points I want to make. The first one is this seems to be a classic case of the ends justifying the means, which would have to be a classic case of scientific ethics going out the window. The second point I want to make is people might argue that it's their lives, their body, and their choice, so that if they are quadriplegic, for example, wanting to try and have the miracle of walking again, that it should be up to them to be able to do it. But are we getting ahead of story here by just going ahead without any regard for the damage that's caused along the way?
Well, I had this discussion before with ludicrous experiment during a thesis defense. Ludicrous experiments, and the committee was discussing whether somebody should go ahead. Argument towards it was that it was such a benefit for people with Parkinson. Well, 2 of my grandparents died of Parkinson. Unfortunately, we all die, and I'm not so sure that the pain inflicted on anybody was worth it. And I wouldn't consider that the pain of a whole bunch of macaques or whoever, or whatever people doing the experiment before me would be worth all that pain, my minimal benefit. Now, for a quadriplegic, I understand being stuck against the wall. On the other hand, I've also had people with portions of their body not functioning properly at all, and compared to regular other people. But the point was to assure me that their life was valuable and they enjoyed their life as is. So I'm sure it's a very personal choice. But a personal choice has to be at least approved by medical corpus, and the medical corpus has a very strong safeguard, which is to do no harm. And therefore to not do something just to do something and then see what happens. That is not what is acceptable normally in our, medical field.
This is the great big question, isn't it? When science is in the business of creating miracles to how we've lived our lives up until this point, there has to be more scrutiny to determine that those that are paying the price for said miracles are not punished beyond what human beings accept as a standard ethics. Professor Sivan Woodward, thanks for your time today on Compass.
Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, once we understand the ethics and harms to animals, that is, the ends justifying the means, what happens when we move from potentially allowing the blind to see again or the paraplegic to walk again? Is anyone thinking about augmentation and one-upmanship in modern society? So I decided to reach out to another doctor who's worked in the military, who now works privately, understands how the brain works, and also defends animals. Dr. Aisha Akhtar is an American neurologist, public health specialist, and animal ethicist. She's also the co-founder, CEO, and president of the Center for Contemporary Sciences, and she's also a US veteran. Dr. Akhtar, welcome to Compass.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
This disturbing case of Elon Musk's Neuralink and the monkeys that have been involved, and we're seeing numerous deaths now, and this is raising a lot of ethical concerns, and I wanted to get your take on it.
I was going to say up front, it is not uncommon. It's probably the norm that animals used in experimentation are going to die, either from the experimentation or they're intentionally killed after the experimentation is over. So I was not surprised whatsoever to hear about the deaths of these monkeys and also the incredible suffering they must have endured, according to news reports.
Once we understand that, then we move to the next level in all of these scientific experiments, the idea that somehow science is creating miracles. And this is where we start to think, well, does the end justify the means in this particular situation?
If you read what the allegations are and what the reports are suggesting is that these non-human primates, these monkeys, suffered from brain swelling, edema, inflammation, infection. They had implants that were shoddily placed, let's say that. They had infection and they had brain bleeding. And so you can imagine that not only was that incredible suffering for these animals, why think about the fact that we're now going to try to put these implants into human beings, and you have to really question the ethics of going of moving into human beings as well, because it looks like it was very shoddily done work. And quite frankly, I'm really surprised that the Food and Drug Administration has allowed for this to continue on to human clinical trials. Now, going back to the larger question about the scientific sort of implications of implantation like this, I think there's a role for a very focused use of implantation in the future, which if it can help quadriplegics, if it can help people with paralysis, if it can help people who suffered from a stroke and are unable to talk and so on, then there's certainly a role. The thing is that we can't rush so fast into something like this, which seems like what Neuralink is doing. And we certainly should not be using other animals to do this. We have organ systems that we can test these implants in the lab that would give us far more accurate results. And we can actually even grow miniature human brains in the lab to test the implantation of such procedures as well. So there are other ways of doing these experiments and doing them slowly and carefully before we proceed to putting them in human beings. Also, we have to also discuss, and I would say question, the larger implications of implantations that are not necessarily there for curing or helping an ailment, right? So there could be potential use of implantation to augment and to enhance. And if you think about that, if it can augment certain types of sensory functions, augment memory, augment all kinds of things down the road, who are the ones that are going to benefit from this implantation? It's going to be the rich. It's going to be the wealthy. It's going to be those who can afford such a device. It's not going to be the mass. It's not going to be you and me. So that puts those wealthy people who are already at an advantage at a further advantage when you think about it. So there's so many ethical considerations with regards to these experiments, not only on the animals, and of course, definitely including the suffering that these animals endured, but also for the people who are going to be enrolled in the clinical trials, who are going to be the first people in whom these implants are tested on. And of course, there are going to be ethical questions that we have to ask, that because this has larger ramifications for all of us.
If we just step back a bit back into augmentation, this is an area that concerns me, because if we're already moving into a world of AI and we hit this singularity and all of a sudden one's job may be replaced by an AI robot or an AI computer, for example, there would be the temptation for many to say, you know what, I might go down the pathway and take this particular Neuralink chip because I need this augmentation. I'll put perhaps I'll remortgage my home, spend the $500,000, let's say, to do this. Where do we go in terms of an ethical perspective there to say, hang on a second, we need to have a very, very big conversation almost globally about what we want to do as a human species? Where do we start in this conversation?
We need to start now. And I think what you're doing right here is absolutely what we need to be doing. And I have not seen a lot of media or any media actually starting to question these things. And I think as far as Neuralink is concerned. And so I think what you're doing is great. And so we do need to have this conversation. The unfortunate reality is that people, if there is a way to do something with technology, the process happens first and questions come much later, usually after it's too late, right? With any new technology, we start to question the ethical implication almost after it's too late. We did that with the nuclear weapons. We did that with so many things. And so even in medical research, that's happened again and again. And we don't stop to ask early in the process, not, can we do this, but should we be doing this? And that's really what we need to be doing.
Dr. Aisha Akhtar, thanks for your time today on World Series News.
Thanks so much, Jason. It was lovely talking with you.
We really have hit a crossroads of science fiction manifesting into reality. But like the mRNA technology used on humans to potentially prevent COVID, a virus similar to the flu with a few add-ons, the solution is somehow being proven to be worse than the problem. And then there is the religious aspect, or the mark of the beast, which has whole populations rallying against such technology. It's one thing to make it voluntary. It is entirely different, though, when you don't have a choice. For one, it is the chip to perform daily functions like banking or identification. It is another to require augmentation to compete, to gain employment, or another to keep one's own job. We all saw how easily people lined up to take mRNA in order to keep a job, and just how easily people choose their vaccine by brand, like that meant anything. Like a form of tribalism, people were sharing the brand name of their medicine like it was their new football team. Whether we think of Ian Malcolm's character in Jurassic Park or the H.G. Wells science fiction classic The Island of Dr. Moreau, there is a tendency more than ever in the world of science run by money for the next big thing. As Professor Woodward pointed out, it is shocking to think that the world would jeopardise our bodily autonomy for advantage. And if we all have to do it, we are making the Homo sapien as we know it extinct by our own hand. I am encouraged by Dr. Akhtar, who is saying that the only way to get this started is by talking about it. Thanks for watching this special report on World Series News.